I get to bypass local space-time rules by writing numbers down on a piece of paper and making a squiggle. That's pretty impressive.
Mm.
I don't know of anything else that I've ever seen or encountered or experienced that has that capability. So when I see a UAP violating space-time rules, I only know of one thing that lets you do that.
This is the Strange and Mysterious World podcast, in conjunction with Elusis TV. These are your hosts, Lee Stridham and William Collinson.
Welcome to Strange and Mysterious World, Season 5, Episode 19. Tonight's guests, all the way from the US. His name is Ryan Kralik. He is a writer and communication strategist with over 20 years of experience in media, marketing, and narrative development. For more than 2 decades, his research has explored the intersections of physics, anomalies, civilization, and culture, asking how these domains align and shape the human story. A trained remote viewer, having studied under Paul H. Smith and Laurie Williams, he is named Managing Director of Aperture Magazine, the official publication of the International Remote Viewing Association. In 2026, he has written for publications including Aperture Ancient Origins and Greek Reporter, and has appeared on podcasts discussing the information first framework and the evolution of human understanding, with focus on how story and narrative drive behavior, identity, and civilization's larger arc towards coherence. It From Us is actually a book that he's written, is Information First Framework and the Purpose of Consciousness, is available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle, and the editions are on Amazon. So yeah, looking forward to having him on tonight. William, unfortunately, is not able to join us tonight, but yeah, let's bring on Ryan. So look, I've done an introduction for you already. It's actually lekker to have you on the show. Lekker is the Afrikaans word for nice, so nice to have you on the show. Obviously, being from South Africa, we've got our own slang here. But
it's South Africa is like, of course, I don't probably I'll end up sounding offensive saying this, but I don't know a ton about South Africa. But it's kind of like, it's a little bit like Australian. It's like if you mixed Australian, like 75% Australian accent and sprinkled in the rest German. It's kind of, you know.
You probably get there. Yeah, a lot of people say we sound Russian for some reason. I don't know.
Oh, I don't pick up on that, but I don't hear a lot of Russians either.
Yeah, apparently it's because of the
My
strong,
day-to-day.
the very strong accent. So awesome, man. So okay, so two things that was actually pretty interesting. You've got a book coming out, and you're a remote viewer, and I'm very keen for that because we training remote viewers, myself and William. So that's actually very, very cool.
I've noticed, you know, when you are kind of doing outreach for podcasts and stuff, when you're doing it on your own, you don't really have enough time to check out thoroughly every show before you shoot off an email. And so I had checked out your show kind of when I was putting a list together, but then I only recently dug into it in the last week, and I've enjoyed it. I was like, oh, these guys are pretty excited about remote viewing. So
very excited, very, very excited. Yeah.
Me
So
too.
we came from the David Morehouse stable. We kind of, we did his courses and stuff. So there's a lot of things. Look, I don't know if you saw the interview we had with Lynn Buchanan a couple of weeks ago.
I actually was listening to, I don't know if it's the most recent one, but in the car earlier, I was listening to one that you did with Lynn.
Yeah. And look, it's strange because, I mean, they come from the same background, like with Project Stargate. So, but yet they've got their own techniques and their own ways. With David, he says you should get into, and just for people out there, I'll explain it as we go, but he says you should actually go into your cool downs, where Lynn and Laurie say, no, you don't need to do cool downs. It's just a kind of a process. But William and I were thinking, but how do you get to that alpha brain state and your theta brain state without doing a cool down? I mean, surely you need to be able to drop your normal beta state where you're sitting currently and drop it down so you can start accessing the visuals that start coming through when you start doing the stages. So I don't know. Each person has their own thing. So we kind of almost get confused as who do we believe? Because one
Well,
says
it's
do
easy
this,
to
one
get
says do that.
confused.
Yeah.
So I'll give you my thoughts on that. I don't think it's a question of believe this one or don't believe that one, right? I don't think that you can be harmed by trying different methods to most things, you know. And but I can tell you my personal experience and what that has been. Now, first of all, I initially was teaching myself, right? Remote viewing. And I mean that story is in a lot of places. If you want to hear it, I'll tell it to you. But
Yeah,
it's
go for it.
it's an easy story to get. But I essentially was a materialist, or you know, that's the category that I'd fall into. Not that I didn't believe, you know, psychic function was possible, but until I was able to understand it, I wasn't going to accept it. That's really who I am. I don't believe things just because it sounded good when somebody said it, right? Because I know how easy it is to make something sound good and believable, right? But I I was always interested in topics like this, UAP, or you know, it was called UFO in my day. Remote viewing. I read a book about something very similar to remote viewing when I was a little kid, and it always stuck with me. I always remembered the book when you know, the mid '90s, when stuff started to come out about the military program. I immediately thought back to that book again. I'm like, oh, that's just like that book. I've known about this thing, you know. And in that book, it was a book for kids, but it was a couple of kids doing outbound or remote viewing. And they didn't call it that in the book. They just called it ESP. But it's like, I went back recently and read through some of the book, and, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the author knew Ingo or knew something about him, but Ingo Swann. But, you know, so fast forward to, you know, a few years ago, and I was struggling, you know, personally. I had sold a business and was just going through a lot of things, didn't really know, you know, what was next. And, you know, I was depressed and not working. So kind of sitting around the house all day, moping. And, so I started diving back into some of these topics that I'd always followed. And that's everything from ancient civilizations to, you know, physics to remote viewing. And I read Ingo's book, Penetration, Ingo Swann, essentially the founder or one of the founders of what we call remote viewing today. And I was reading it for the aliens. I heard he spins a good yarn about Mars and the moon and all that.
Yeah.
Aliens on the moon, right? Human slaves, naked slaves on the moon, building structures for the aliens. I'm like, well, that'll keep me busy for a day or two. So I read it, and I wasn't thinking, oh, well, I'm going to read this and it's about remote viewing. I mean, I guess I probably knew that was a part of it, but you know, I'm getting through that book and I'm like, here this thing is again. It keeps kind of weaving its way back onto my path. I thought that was strange. But I decided to dig in some more. So then I got Lynn Buchanan's book, The Seventh Sense, and I'm reading that. And the thing that I noticed about both of those books, and then later the podcasts, and you know, the personality, a number of the personalities in this kind of space, is they struck me as more believable than they should. Right. My training, you know, I'm almost 27 years in sales and marketing. My training is what can be said that will make you do the thing my clients want you to do. Right. That's what I'm an expert at. Is, you know, when in my 20s, I was learning neuro-linguistic programming. Everybody else was going to football games or whatever. And I'm learning neuro-linguistic programming alongside marketing strategy and marketing theory. Because that's what I do, is I put my clients in a position to swim with the current of persuasion, right? What is the most likely thing that's going to make the most people do the thing we want them to do? So that training over time conditions you to recognize, usually the thing that I recognize is what somebody's motivation is. I can tell by the language that they use whether or not their motivation is they want to be an authority, whether or not their motivation is, and in stuff like this, a lot of time it's ego. Whether or not this is an ego that is motivating the language, or is it something else? And I wasn't seeing very much of that from Ingo and from Lynn and other people in that space. And that I found unsettling, because in UAP, UAP is loaded with it. It is, I would say it's well below half of the things that I watch about UAP or read about UAP strike me that the language being used is not grandiose. It's not motivated by ego, right? The majority of people in that space are full of crap. They're chasing clicks. They don't know anything, right? Mm-hmm. In remote viewing, I wasn't seeing the same percentages. And I was like, what? I wonder what that's about. So halfway through Lynn's book, I put it down and I said, all right, they say everybody can do it. All right, everybody can do it. This should be easy. I can check this off the list right now and move on to something more productive.
Yeah.
Or it's real, one of the two. So I got a marble out of a drawer, a little glass kid's marble, blue and green and glass and round, and it's a marble. And I went and got my wife. She was outside. I said, come in here and sit down and do what I say and don't think. And she probably knew I probably made a few comments, whatever. Hey, I'm reading this book. Here's what it's about. That's crazy. I read this other book when I was a kid, probably like that. And then, so she says, okay, but she didn't know anything about remote viewing. I sat her down. I gave her a piece of paper and a pen. I said, basically told her what to do, as I understood it by then anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I gave her the number. She writes the number. She makes the squiggle. That's exactly what I said. Just make a squiggle. Don't think. She makes the squiggle. I said, now, don't tell me what's in my pocket. Describe what's in my pocket, that your mind knows about what's in my pocket. She says, okay. She writes round, small, smooth, green. I said, now sketch your impression of it. She draws a circle with 3 squiggly lines inside of it. And I said, well, shit.
This is real.
Yeah. So spent the rest of the day doing remote viewing experiments around the house, hit after hit after hit, but in the beginner remote viewing way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest problems I think that remote viewing has. We're getting over it, but everybody thinks remote viewing must work however they think it works. Right? So, if you can't produce a photographic sketch of the exact thing from the exact angle, then obviously then it's all made up. And, even when I do podcasts, people are like, so when you traveled to the target, no, this is not a movie, right? This is an actual thing. Yeah. And it works how it works. It doesn't work how you think it should because you saw it on a movie. But, it was life-changing. And I knew right then, the fact that I didn't stop there and I had to keep going pretty much told me how this was going to go. I needed some time to digest it, to come to terms with the fact that the universe is obviously much, much different than we're trained. But once I had that, once I had accepted that, which probably took a few months, I said, well, I want to know how this works. I want to know what we're wrong about, how wrong we are. I have to, in fact, I have to know. And So I started teaching myself remote viewing. I read Dave's book, Dave Morehouse. I read uh, Paul Smith's Reading the Enemy's Mind. I just read loads of books on it. Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff. I read their book, and then I read Russell's other book. Just book after book after book after book, some of which are nonsense. But this remote viewing still isn't a profitable enough industry that the motivation to write a book is going to be enough money. You know, it's not quite like some of the other categories of clickbait where loads of money can come from it. But I was continuing to see this trend where these people did not seem to be full of crap. And of course, by then I knew it was real anyway, because I'd been doing it. I hit a point where I didn't feel like I was going to understand it better or get better if I didn't learn it from somebody. And I wanted to learn from Paul Smith, but his classes were difficult to take. You know, it required travel. They were rarely planned very far in advance. So it's kind of like drop everything and fly across the country for a week. That was never that easy for me to do. So I started with Lori Williams. I took her basic class. And I think I asked Lynn, hey, what are you doing? And he said, yeah, I'm not really teaching now in that way. You know, I recommend you go to Lori. So I did. And I learned with Lori, and I got quite a lot better. Nothing against Lori or Lynn, but there's a couple things with their method that for whatever reason, I think I know what the reason is. It doesn't really matter. For whatever reason, I did not have as good a success with it. And intrinsically, it felt like there was just a piece missing. So fast forward a couple more years, and I end up writing this book, It From Us, which
Nice.
which actually proposes that we're wrong about reality altogether. And like I've heard you and your co-host, I've watched you guys go through this, and I've watched a lot of people go through it, where there's like, okay, well then there's physical reality, and there's what we see in remote viewing. So there must be this other thing, but what do we call it? And some people call it Akashic field, and some people call it consciousness field, and everybody's got a word for it, none of which are scientific in any way, right? Mm. It's just like we're kind of going by feel. What ancient tradition feels like it matches the best what we're seeing, and that doesn't sit with me. You know, I'm an empiricist. There is nothing that science can't get to an understanding of. It's just a process to do that. And so I started evaluating all the things that all these topics that I'd always studied, and I ended up developing a framework. Over many months, I tested it. I beat it to death. I went to Hal Puthoff, and I said, would you look at this, please? And Hal Puthoff read it, and he said, yeah, this is pretty much how I think it works too. And I was like, why did he say that? Why couldn't he have just said, what a dumb idea, Ryan. Go back to being a marketing person, would you? But he didn't. And I went to Paul Smith and I said, hey, take a look at this. Paul's a, PhD in philosophy, consciousness studies. I mean, very smart guy. And he looks it over and he says, you might have something. I went to Rupert Sheldrake. I said, would you read this? He said, sure. He read it. He's like, yeah, this is consistent with what I've been saying about morphic resonance and all that. So I shopped it basically to all these people that I respected, who I thought would have no problem, kicking the legs out from under me if I was on the wrong track, but none of them did that. But what my framework and book essentially say is that underlying our physical reality is an informational configuration, what I call a substrate. And I'm willing to accept that we might be splitting hairs. I'm about to use scientific language to describe the Akashic field to you, and that's okay. But if you look at quantum mechanics, where we're trying to understand the behavior of a particle, and so we shoot it through a panel with two slits in it, and we shoot one particle, or what we understand to be one particle, and on the other side of that slit, we have another panel that shows us, an incalculable number of dots. How does one particle make tens of thousands of dots? Should be one dot. It should go through one slit and show us one dot on the other side, but it doesn't. It shows us tens of thousands of dots, and it shows us that it went through both slits. And the reason for that is it isn't a particle. It's a field. It's information about particle behavior. And so the reason that I think nobody's ever brought all these things together before, what I'm saying is all of reality is that. Everything is actually, in fact, just the material state of the information that underlies it. And there's a reason that this resonates with so many ancient traditions, and we can get into that if you want to. But in the beginning, there was the word. The Vedic tradition says that Om is it's a vibration, is the beginning of the universe. And so, but that's what the framework says fundamentally. It says the underlying physical reality is information. That information is essentially what everything is made out of. And so, therefore, it's not weird at all that you have access to information that doesn't have anything to do with your physical location or physical access. So that's how it ended up happening, though. I wanted to know how remote viewing worked.
Okay.
And I ended up with a framework trying to explain remote viewing. And maybe I explained the whole damn thing, but I guess time will tell. Time will tell. But that brings us to today. And since then, I've trained with Paul Smith. And I just recently took over as the managing editor of Aperture, which is I think right now it's twice a year magazine put out by the International Remote Viewing Association. So I'm engaged with that community, and I think I'm working on my next book, but it takes a little while to know for sure. But
okay, well, that sounds because I know I can't say 100%, but I do know, or I do feel that, like you said, there is something underlying, something that we all have access to at any stage. Obviously, we've been untrained to figure it out, or to run with it, or to learn how it's actually done. I think we've
in fact we've been intentionally trained not to do that.
Yes.
And most of our civilizations currently, last couple hundred years for sure, we're in the Western world at least, we are in fact trained that that's nonsense. Like, if your kid is clairvoyant, you try to stop that quick before somebody finds out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's actually quite sad, because as kids, I think as a child you have access to this stuff straight off. And when all these things start happening, whether it's telekinesis or whether it's like possession or whatever, you got these things that are happening, paranormal activities that are happening around kids. That was actually a natural state, and it was just developed, to a proper line. But like you said, I think unfortunately for our religious people, our religious listeners out there, I'm sorry to say this, but when religion creeps in, it just destroys the whole structure and the framework of everything that we were, and we've lost it completely. Yes, now
isn't that funny?
Kind of snippets. We've got snippets of it, but yeah, it is.
Isn't that funny though? That, like, if you look at, if you look at my framework, there's a few aspects of science that kind of immediately look like so quantum mechanics fits with that. All right. Mm-hmm. Or, some of the things that people like Rupert Sheldrake have said about, biology, self-organizing systems, that seems to resonate a little bit. But for the most part, the way that we've thought about science is kind of counterintuitive to what I'm proposing. But then you go and look at these ancient religious traditions, and you're like, oh, those match up pretty nice. And yet, it seems anyway that by and large the religious traditions, or at least the most recent instantiations of them, are as against it or more against it than science is. Like you've heard Lynn's story about the pie plate. You know,
Yeah.
the minister and his goons, swoop out of nowhere to pin him to the ground and exorcise the demons out of him. Which I've heard him tell that story a number of times. It's a tremendous story. But yeah, I get what you're saying, and I also think it's a shame because, like you guys have talked to Dick Allgaier before. He's got this old story about, I think it was a guy that he knew had picked up accidentally a cat at this. I think he was in Utah. This guy was in Utah. He was getting gas, and the gas station there had some cats. Like a little town in the desert kind of thing. And one of the cats had gotten into his truck. And then this guy drives home. I think it was over 100 miles to Idaho. And he stopped to get gas again, realizes that there's a cat. And he tries to get the cat. He's going to take it back to the town that he was in. And the cat runs away. He spends a while trying to find the cat. The cat just isn't having it. He's off doing his own thing. So the guy goes home, calls that service station, and says, "Hey, I'm sorry, but one of the cats was in my truck, and he got away, and it was 120 miles or whatever from you, and I'm so sorry, And a couple of months later, the cat was back at home in pretty sad shape. He had a rough time of it. But that cat figured out how to get home from 100 miles away. And what that tells me, it's anecdotal, but it correlates to what guys like Dean Radin and Rupert Sheldrake and a number of others have been saying for decades now. The new part of our brain is the part that says this stuff isn't real. It is real. It's been there all along, right? And what I call the informational substrate, and like in my book, I think I do a good job anyway, showing how science already really shows us how this works. We're all made out of it. We're connected. Of course, we're connected to it. My subatomic particles are also quantum events. They make up my atoms. I'm made out of the damn stuff. So yeah, I'm connected to it. And the parts of our brain that we use for remote viewing, all these protocols you and I are learning all the time and trying to understand, are about really getting our brains to recognize that they're not just human. Right? They're older than
important.
that.
Yeah, I think that's important. We've got to get back to our original state.
I think it was important that we did what we did, right? I think if and when we get to a point where we come to be friendly or cooperative with other civilizations around the universe, and I think that's likely. I think we're going to find that the trajectory that we've been on is common, right? If we all come from the same thing, there's a reason that all planets are round. There's a reason that all galaxies spin. There's reasons for this because the things that cause those underlying, they cause it everywhere, right? So I think that biological life evolving, we're going to find that that's a real similar process everywhere. And the trajectory of a society, same thing. If we hadn't abandoned maybe what we had on the plains of the savannah 50,000, 100,000 years ago, if we hadn't moved in the direction we did, we wouldn't have any of this stuff, right? Now, we might have been a spiritually enlightened hunter-gatherer, and that's fine. But what we have an opportunity now is now we've developed this system essentially of tool making and problem solving that is really spectacular. Well, when these two rivers come back together, you could call it science and spirituality or however you want to look at it. When these two rivers come back together, they're coming back together with tremendous tools at their disposal. Now, I promise you, a UAP does not get from wherever it started to hovering over the USS Nimitz as hunter-gatherers with wonderful spiritual development. Mm. You need to have this other system of tools. Now, I believe that what UAPs show us is once you have that other system of tools and integrate it with this thing that exists whether you pay attention to it or not, exists whether you acknowledge it or not. When you put those two things together, that's what you can do.
Okay. Let me ask you a question.
Is what they do. Right? Yeah.
So I get that. I think that's 100% correct. My worry is, so if it's a worry, it's not a massive worry. It's a little bit of a worry with this AI that's coming in, the artificial intelligence. So what they say, and I know James Cameron with all these movies that we've had and, all these things taking over and Judgment Day and all these things, it seems like we're getting pretty close to a point where you're going to have almost machines running the earth or running the world. So my only worry is once we pass the point of no return and that becomes the norm, where do we go? Because a lot of the guys are saying, look, it's going to be a Terminator. We got to be extinguished. We're not going to be available. And obviously with machine, I don't think machine has the same consciousness as we do. I mean, we're pretty special, in my opinion. We're pretty special in that way because we have that link. I don't think machines do. I might be wrong. It's just my opinion. So where do you think we would go with that? And the other thing is a lot of UAP sightings, and when you've got these generals that have gone in and they're coming through as whistleblowers and they're talking about certain things that are found, and there seems to be a lot of biological, natural, where the entity is actually interfacing with the machine or with their UAP. I hate UAP, with the UFO. But it all seems alive. It's not mechanical as we see it. It's almost like it's biological, the UFO. So would that be a different trajectory as to going the AI trajectory? Do you think it should have been going more of a natural process, or do you think this AI thing is actually necessary for us to get to that stage?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I felt the same way. Before I developed this framework, I'm like, well, how does consciousness play into this whole thing? And I still feel this way. Consciousness, nothing is made out of consciousness. It can't be. Consciousness isn't made out of anything, so how could anything be made out of it? I think I get why people look at it this way. They're looking at it this way because up until very recently, what I'm saying couldn't even have been proposed, right? In 1900, information meant stuff in newspapers and things that are true. It did not mean what it means today. There was no information theory. There was no, we didn't understand electrons. We didn't have the language or the data or the knowledge to be able to say something like what I'm saying, which is underlying physical is essentially an informational field. So because of that, we've spent the last 100 years at least trying to find something that sounds right. And so it's largely been consciousness lately. And I've recorded many podcasts that never air. And I've isolated when that happens. When that happens is when I say consciousness is not fundamental, and the podcast host or producer doesn't believe that and doesn't want to say it, doesn't want it said, right? But consciousness is not fundamental. Consciousness is what happens when the informational substrate biases coherent outcomes. And that's what I say happens. That's the only constraint in reality is a coherence bias. And that leads to gravity and electromagnetism and strong nuclear force. It leads to you and I saying that we like each other. It leads to a citizen saying they share the ideas of their society. It leads to somebody looking at a painting and saying, I like that. It is plus minus, true, false, agree, disagree, entropy or coherence, right? That's the only force is coherence against entropy. And so that constraint leads to planets circling around stars and stars circling around black holes. And it leads to elements becoming minerals and minerals becoming compounds. And it leads to compounds becoming self-organizing and becoming biology. And it leads to biology developing consciousness, or what we understand to be consciousness. Now, consciousness is still amazing. Look at what it does. I am a walking, talking, planning, executing, agentic coherence machine. It's what I do. I walk around all day evaluating what's the more coherent outcome and making a choice based on that. We organize whole civilizations. We travel from planet to planet because of consciousness and its ability to serve the coherence bias of the substrate, right? So it's also how we remote view, right? It's the collection of features that happen when an organism gets complex enough that allow us to access information about something that we just have no business knowing, right? So that means that we get to a point where our consciousness essentially allows us to break the rules of the material world. I get to bypass local space-time rules by writing numbers down on a piece of paper and making a squiggle. That's pretty impressive. I don't know of anything else that I've ever seen or encountered or experienced that has that capability. So when I see a UAP violating space-time rules, I only know of one thing that lets you do that: conscious intent. And so what I think those UAP are, I don't think they're machines the way that you and I look at, the stuff around the table. Oh, that's a machine. That's a machine. I don't think they work that way. I think they're conscious intent amplifiers. I think they are substrate rule editors. They are an interface between a consciousness, their intent, and the substrate itself. And that's how they can, go from here to there in a way that, frankly, our physics would insist are never going to be possible. You couldn't even make a material that you can't make a material that out of physical things that will withstand the problems from inertia and friction and resistance and so on, to go from 2,000 feet above sea level to 250 miles above the earth in a fraction of a second. We will never develop a material that can do that unless it is doing so outside of the rules of our physical reality. So that's how I see them. So I think your questions about that point in the right direction. I think they are conscious intent amplifiers, and that's why people who see them have this feeling like they're somehow connected to it. They're interacting with it. It notices them. Well, I would expect that out of something that was designed by a civilization, 200,000 years more advanced than us, that knows all this.
With what you're saying makes a ton of sense. Look, I'm not a scientific person, so I don't know all the the scientific terms and scientific understanding. All I know is that there is something there, because to access something from nothing, there's definitely going to be something. There's definitely something there. And I mean, when I started doing the remote viewing, the first time I actually did it was when Dick Algar, I saw one of his YouTube videos that he had with, he was chatting to, it was an audience. I can't remember the lady's name. And he said he's got something in his pocket. It's a photo. And you guys in the studio, everybody got a pen and paper. And then he said, even you guys, if you're watching this, even if it's months later, grab a piece of paper. I'm going to give you the numbers. And then he kind of went through his process.
Right.
Uh, and I did this thing and I was like, phew. I had a look and he says, okay. And then he says, what did you get? And I'm thinking, I've got this like squiggly lines on either side and this, that, and next thing. And I thought, okay, it looks like I'm in some sort of park. And then he pulled out his picture and it was the Eiffel Tower. And I was like, oh, fuck, I was so far off. I was like, no, yeah. But then he says, but if you look at the picture, you didn't necessarily have to get the Eiffel Tower. You could have got stuff around it. You could, and then I looked at his picture and I looked at the picture I had drawn, and it was the back. It's where the buildings were, because I'd drawn that. It looked like I thought it might be in a park with trees, but it had actually, I'd drawn the exact area behind the Eiffel Tower. So if you put the Eiffel Tower in front of that, it would have been the overlay. So I was like, oh shit, that's actually pretty cool. So that's what got my interest. That was like, wow, okay, there's something here. So, and then from there, it's kind of just myself and William. We did the David Morehouse, like I said earlier, we did the David Morehouse training, not personally with him, but he's got that online course that we just.
I don't know if I could handle in person with Dave Morehouse. He's an intense guy.
Yeah, he sounded very very cool. I mean, when he's explaining it, I could see exactly what he was trying to explain. And
he's cool, but he just, he's like me. He gets fired up about something and just, kind of, you're like, oh.
But now I want to ask you something. Like, so we're going back to remote viewing. I know we've kind of got into the scientific part of things now for how it happens. But there was something when I did a few things with Laurie as well in her course, which the guys say, do the numbers. So I did the numbers.
Yep.
And then you do your ideogram. To people out there, it's like a little squiggle, which I will kind of get to.
It's like a squiggle, but it's so much more.
Squiggle. Yeah. So it's like a kind of, but now when Laurie and them do it, so I get a bit confused because Laurie and them, they do the numbers, blah, 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 whatever, number 1, 2, whatever. They leave a gap between the numbers and then they do their ideogram. But David says, no, you can't leave a gap, because if you leave a gap, you've got to have a break. So that means you've missed the signal line. And this, because he says the signal line has to come straight from the last digit. So if your last digit was a 4, as an example, so you did a 4, as soon as you do the 4, your hand is supposed to go into the ideogram. It shouldn't be missing and then go and do an ideogram. Now, so
yes.
That's kind of how we started doing our ideograms. But then the problem is as well is that when Laurie and them do an ideogram, they do like it's like a small squiggle, where I've got this it's like this long thing, and you're seeing biologicals because it's got the and then it's got this structure. And so I'm having a look, and I would say out of the 150 sessions that I've done, and not full sessions, I normally get to about 3. And I stop there because I think I'm still trying to learn 4, 5, and 6. But my ideogram, 90% of the time, the ideogram alone tells me exactly what is there. So, but they say, no, you must now leave it. So as soon as you've done the ideogram and you've done the A, B, and C components, you must move on. And I'm thinking, but I can't move on because it's saying there's a biological, it says there's a structure there. It says, so how can I move on and leave it when it's actually told me what is there?
Well, I'm happy to answer this question because I've gone through the same thing, and I've, since I've listened to or watched probably 3 or 4 of these episodes that you guys have done with Lynn, with Dick, with some folks like that, I can kind of see right where you guys are at, and so maybe I've got something that'll help. When I took Laurie's class, and what her and Lynn teach is, you're going to program your subconscious to produce these ideograms that represent the Gestalt, right? So I sat just right where I'm sitting right now. I sat here for, I'm not kidding you, hundreds of hours with a piece of paper and a recording that randomly, Laurie's got one of these. It randomly spouts off land, water,
structure,
air, energy, motion, biological. Yeah. And so I just sit there I mean, days of my life I spent doing that, right? And what happened is I ended up with an ideogram that was identical every time, like a signature, right?
Okay.
Like when you sign your name, it's the same every time. And I'd asked Lori, I'm like, hey, here, I'm having this problem. She's like, keep at it. You'll just keep at it. Ask Lynn. He'd say, no, you got to program your subconscious. Well, then when I was writing the book, It From Us, I was talking to Paul Smith, and we I don't remember what we were talking about exactly, but I told him I'm having an ideogram problem. This was a couple years ago, and he's like, "Well, you learned from Lori, right?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, that's essentially Lynn's method, and Lynn says you got to program your subconscious with these ideograms." And Paul said, "But that's not what Ingo taught us." And just so you know, Paul and Lynn, they're good friends, but this is like an old buried hatchet with them, is this thing about ideograms. And each of them has Ingo on tape saying something, to prove to the other, right? They both think that the other guy's got it wrong. But the way Paul explained it to me made total sense. He said that ideogram is there to tell you, right? It's discovering what that ideogram has to say is a big part of remote viewing. It's not just a translation of a concept onto the page. And as soon as he said that, it was like, oh, I immediately saw where for me anyway, this was where it was not all coming together for me. So then I went and took Paul's training. I started over, beginner or, the initial 3 stages. And it was completely different rather than, and I was decent at this before. I would describe myself prior to learning Paul's methods, Ingo, what he says are Ingo's methods. I was maybe something like 60 to 70% accurate, 60 to 70% of the time, right? But I still had absolute misses, off in la la land, because I'm following an ideogram, that says there's a structure there when there isn't one, because it's not a reliable ideogram for me. Okay. I'm not saying that this is going to be true for everybody. Lynn and Lori are clearly both amazing at this. They use this method. I'm just saying for me, that process wasn't as effective. But now I would say more often, it's pretty rare that I'm a goose egg, right? Nothing. Now there's times that I'm more accurate than others, but I would describe myself now as probably more like 90+% accurate. I break it into 2 things. Are you right about the Gestalt? Are you accurate about the elements? Right. And I would say that, regarding the Gestalts, I'm almost always accurate. Regarding the elements, and what I mean by that, just for folks that might not know, the Gestalt it's a building, right? It's furniture. It's water. It's right. Those are Gestalts. It's the one word thing that describes it that everyone will understand. It's base. What is it basically? Yeah. So about Gestalts, I'm mostly accurate. About elements, and I used to be 60+% on both of these categories. Now it's probably like 80 to 90 across the board because of the ideogram. It doesn't just activate your quote unquote right brain. It doesn't, and for me anyway, it never gave me a reliable report of what is or is not at the target, right? And now it does, because now it isn't this pre-programmed thing that just for me wasn't working. And so when I do an ideogram, but let me get at what you were saying. And I've noticed this with both you and the other host, his name's Michael.
William.
I'm sorry, William. So you and William both, I see it in your eyes when you're talking about this. You guys are experiencing that initial excitement every time where you're like, I better go fast so I don't think. Right? Coordinates, ideogram, and I don't know if I've seen the complete sessions that you guys have done, but it looks like some of the time you just go right to drawing, right?
William does.
Okay, yeah.
William,
That's exactly what I did at the beginning. When I was first seeing that this thing was real, I was like, who wants to write a bunch of words down? I want to draw it. That's how you know you're right? Anybody can write brown and round and, flat and sandy. That's not cool. What's cool is drawing the thing and then seeing that it's almost just like what it is. But the reason that there's this process in remote viewing is because being right is actually not the goal of remote viewing. What I mean is figuring out what the target is not the remote viewer's job if you really get right down to it. The remote viewer's job is to gather the data. It's actually, in an operational situation, it's somebody else's job to figure out what all your information means. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't a great feeling. When the first one I ever did was this, I have it around here somewhere. There's a shelf in one of the rooms of my house. My wife puts a Post-it note on it with the 4-digit number. She comes and gives me the 4-digit number. This is that same day that she did the marble. I made her run all over the house, sticking notes on stuff. And I was just, I couldn't stop. And I write the number down. I do the ideogram, which for me is just a squiggle at the time. And then I start sketching. It's like, and that's a psychic modality all on its own, by the way, just kind of free sketching. But, and I draw this like oblong, like a top heavy diamond, like an oblong diamond, and like some lines around it, but I don't know what any of it means, right? It just looks like a bunch of nonsense. And I'm done. Okay, I write end, even though I don't know why that's important. I'm just doing what's in the book.
Yeah.
And I said, I said, what is it? She goes, it's there's a shelf in there. I'm looking at my paper. I'm like, this isn't a shelf.
Yeah.
This is an oblong diamond with lines, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Would that be all right?
Yeah.
Because I can show you. I can show it to you. So that you can see what I mean. That's the world we live in now, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Let's
come.
All right.
Yeah.
So there it is. I see these weird rounded diamonds, right?
Yeah.
And here's these lines. It's like, what the hell is this? Okay.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that's a miss. Whatever. Put it down. Leave it alone. Move on to the next one. Yeah. And I only came back later. Probably I read more of something in a book, and it, somebody said, well, hey, sometimes this is going to happen. I go back, and that's when I took this picture. I go back and I look, because I was looking at the shelf. I was looking at an object.
Okay.
And I was looking to see if what I drew is a representation of that object. And I didn't think that it was. I wasn't thinking at all abstractly. Okay.
Yeah.
What are these lines? Well, what's all this?
Those squares there are actually your squares inside the shelf.
No, it's this thing.
Oh,
it's
well,
this
I'm actually
rounded.
You look
it's this
at that,
rounded candle holder. It's a candle holder.
If you take your piece of paper and you move it slightly to a squarer piece, it actually looks like the shelf, the square.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You see what
I do see what you mean.
You got two next to each other, so that means you got squares next. You've got another square to the right of that shelf.
Yeah, it's a bunch of squares, all different sizes and stuff.
100%. So you've actually drawn the shelf. Plus, you've got the line going down the middle, which is the lines of the shelves.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you did. I can see it. You've drawn the shelf.
You could be right, but if you could see this candle holder in real life,
Yeah.
Like if I tilted it this way, it is a rounded corner diamond.
Okay.
It's a four-sided, like a four-sided candle holder, and they come up
Yeah.
like this, you know.
Yeah.
And if you
Um,
look, and in fact, this was me bringing the camera down to be
Ryan,
right at it. If you look at it from my original perspective, it
yeah.
looks just like that.
Yeah, I'm seeing shelves straight away, dude. As soon as you showed me that, because
Well,
it's at an angle, you were obviously looking
either
at it
way, it's
like
pretty good.
this. Yeah, you were looking at it like I said, you were drawing it like that. But if you move, if you had somehow shifted maybe a degree or two down or up, that thing would
Yeah.
have become square, and you would have had your square shelves. That looks exactly like your shelves, but awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's okay, cool. So now let me ask
All
you
right.
something
So,
now with regards to your ideograms and your because obviously there's supposed to be a list of like biological structure, land, water, natural. There's supposed to be a list that people have said, okay, so like biological as an example is your loop. Your structure is like a rectangle, like in a top like an L shape. Your
well,
water is like
That's
squiggly.
the Lynn method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that a standard thing for across remote viewing that everybody kind of picks up? Because it seems to be that's how it comes for me. So every time I get a loop, I know there's a biological in the ideogram. I know it. It's without a doubt because it comes up 95% of the time. There's actually a biological in the ideogram. I mean, in the
Right.
picture. Structure. I get that often. So do you think we all have the same type of idea of what it's supposed to be, and our consciousness is giving, or not the consciousness, your your underlying uh, what can we call it? It's not a consciousness, the underlying
Well, it's
matrix, underlying
like
matrix
a
that's there.
intrinsic understanding or something.
Yes. Has that
Like
got a
it's yeah.
standard that it gives out that maybe we pick up that biological is a loop, or structure is this, or does everybody have their own thing? I don't know. What is your
I
what is
think
your
for
thing?
some people, Lynn and Laurie's method will
Yeah.
work perfectly fine. I think
Yeah.
it comes down to whether or not it meshes with you, that you're going to train your subconscious to produce the ideogram that represents the thing. I was not able to do that. So
No,
I went to
but
the
yeah, but David Morris does the same thing. I mean, he also said line, squiggle for water. So it sounds like they're all saying the same thing. So how does it go for you? So what is
well,
your specific?
Paul and Ingo, and I'm not saying Ingo never said do it that way. It's possible that he
Yeah.
did, but in the end, I've listened, or I've watched a video. It's private, but Paul showed it to me. Watched a video of him and Ingo talking about this, and Ingo said, "Yeah, I don't remember ever saying train your subconscious with an ideogram drill.
Okay.
Ingo's ideogram drill was just to get you comfortable with reacting right now with
Okay.
with some kind of a mark. And as soon as I switched to the method where I'm not going to rely hard and fast on the ideograms, you know, little sections of definition to tell me this definitely means, and because sometimes I default to it. I did one a couple of weeks ago on a podcast where
Yeah.
there was the waviness, and I was like, oh, there's got to be water there. There's just got to be. But that was by and large a logical assumption of mine based on
Mhm.
the old way I did ideograms, which was that always means water. And water's a tricky one because there's almost always water somewhere near everything.
Mm.
It's pretty frequent. But what I do now is if I see a hard angle, I know that I can, and history and many, many times doing this tells me I can pretty well rely on there being some kind of a structure there. I don't even bother with man-made. I don't need that as a gestalt, frankly. I will find that out later in the session anyway. I don't need to know right up front, is it man-made or natural? And frankly, structure, there are man-made structures and there are natural structures. It's more gestaltic than, man-made or building or whatever. So and what I do next is um I describe what the ideogram did. in words, right? And I think primarily what that's about is like kind of marrying together the part of your brain that describes, or that is going to report the data, to the part of your brain that understood the impression. I don't know that it's ever been explained to me that way, but that's how I think about it. And then I start describing. And I mean, for me, the difference between a good session and a bad session a lot of times is when you start writing those words down, those describing words. Are you doing any editing inside, or are you just writing the things down? Almost like you didn't even think of them. You just said them
You
and
talk
you
about
were
stage
writing.
two now. Are you going into stage two now?
Stage two, yeah.
Do?
And
Okay.
and I think that's got a lot to do with establishing and fostering, what they call signal line or your connection to the target, whatever you want to call it, target contact, whatever you want to call that. I think that this is where initially, so the ideogram, if done, properly, kind of established part of your mind contact with the target. And I think how the beginning of stage two goes is really going to determine how well the rest of your mind integrates into that process. Because, we talk about left brain, right brain. That's definitely an oversimplification. Your left brain is involved in this whole process. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to spell. You wouldn't be able to recognize, where to move down to on the paper. I mean, all of that stuff is left brain activity. So, but then I'm just kind of rapid fire the words that are coming to me. Flat, brown. I mean, do you want to see a session?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Some of the guys have got like they do things in order. So like they say, okay, colors. What the colors you see, they go first, like yellow, green, blue, black, purple.
Yeah.
Ah, cool. Then you start like
I think for most people that
then you go, okay, next smells. What do you get? Stinky, freaking rotten. You start going at it, and then the next minute is okay. You're not getting the rest. It's okay. Taste. What you get? Salty.
Right.
So I don't know. Are you supposed to go in order, or is it just like whatever comes? You just whoi?
In stage two, it describe until you can't, and then usually what that's about is it's either indicating that is it time to go to stage three, or do you need to probe and prompt a little bit? But stage four is going to be a lot more of what you're describing, where you've got all these different categories that you're going to put data in and put impressions in. And so in stage four, I think if you're going to do it that way, that would be more the time to prompt yourself. And you can do that just by putting the pen down in the column that you want data from in stage four. And I don't know how much your listeners or viewers know about the stages, but stage four is where you're going to, like, you have a graph that you make on the page, and different kinds of data go in different columns, right? So you've got like, tangible, intangible, things like that. And so in that stage, you are prompting yourself to a certain extent by just touching the tip of your pen in that column and then going from there. But, here's a session for me. And oh, good, it's not backwards. So the first thing I do is what Ingo called, personal inclemencies. Some people call them set-asides. And I do these a little bit differently. I have not found generally that I need to make a laundry list of all the problems in my life or day or whatever. So I usually just write something like this: give yourself permission to fail, or
So
give
I'm
yourself
looking.
permission to
Okay, so
succeed.
that last number of yours looks like a two. Is that am I right? Was that a two?
Where?
That the way your ideogram came off of
Oh, well,
or seven
I
maybe.
don't necessarily look at it like that, but
No,
that's my
I'm just trying.
ideogram.
So what was the numbers there? Is 920682423.
Oh yeah, and I don't leave my pen on the page either. And in fact,
Okay, so there's a gap.
usually I
Okay.
wait a second before I do the
Okay. Just
ideogram
go back up there
because when I
quickly.
go
I just
too
want to see
fast,
some.
oh yeah.
Just put that, yeah, put that back up. So I want to have a look. So I'm seeing structures, one, two, possibly near water, and there's some movement. So gotta go.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what you're seeing, but good
Yeah.
news. My hand did it. It doesn't matter what you see. Uh, so then I start describing yellow, gray, yellow, hard, sandy, gritty, and I could be
Yeah.
describing any element of the target at that point. I'm establishing contact. I don't need to be right or wrong about these things or know what they're right or wrong about. I don't need that yet.
Yeah.
But over here, AOL like a sidewalk. Let me get to the good stuff.
So that was your stage
Um,
two. That's going into stage two there.
yeah, stage two, shiny, dark,
Yeah. Okay.
splashy, a lot of A. I'm an AOL guy. A lot of AOLs.
Yeah.
And then but I had an impression, an AOL of a courthouse. I had an AOL of a lighthouse. Um,
For AL
I
for
took,
our viewers is like the noun. It's the describing
yeah,
item that comes
analytical
into your,
overlay.
yeah. It's like your item that
Yeah,
comes into your mind.
it's your brain doing its job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's why you're alive, is because your ancestors knew how to identify things, right? Like threats. And they did it quickly without you even having to worry or think about it. And so they knew that that was a tiger in the grass over there. And so they lived. And that's why you're here. So, um, and then let me get into some drawings here. Cavernous, secluded. This was a fun one. So then I get to where I'm drawing, and I think, well, this is a waterfall. This is obviously a waterfall.
Yeah. It looks like that. Hey, yeah.
Of course, it wasn't a waterfall. Never going to be a waterfall. And then I ended up with this, where I was like, like this gray monolithic, and I think I wrote monument. Yeah, like a monument.
Okay.
And it ended up being a church that looked just like this, and it had an arch on the top of it with glass
Okay.
in that arch, which looked like a lighthouse. It was in
Okay.
downtown Richmond, Virginia. It looks like a courthouse. Um, and guess what it's called? Monumental Church. That's the name of it,
Was there
right?
any water there?
So
This is like a fountain or something nearby that thing.
there's a river, but I count that against myself. I say no, you were. Well, funny thing though,
Yeah.
there's a water filtration system in the basement, giant water filtration system
Yeah.
that actually it's there to serve the hospital that's adjacent to the church. And one of the guys who gave me that target was he's been to it a lot. He knows a lot about the church. And he said that when that thing is running, all the sounds that I described were absolute, like a
Mm.
cacophony, splashy, loud, all that stuff. But I counted the water against myself because if I said water is a critical part of the gestalt, and it isn't, then
Mm.
I count that as a miss, you know.
I don't know. I think you would have
But
actually been quite sharp. I think that because I mean,
but
if you
I
look at
I go
that, your ideogram told you there was definitely a structure, as you said. There's definitely water in the basement, and there's movement, which is the filtration system. Fuck, man,
well,
yeah, you got
if
it.
if
Got
I'm the
it.
judge, then my subconscious got it wrong because
Yeah.
I say that the water has to be, usually a component of the gestalt of the thing, or I don't necessarily, if it's not important to the target. But I'll also tell you, and this is why so few remote viewers do this, is because the tasking is so important. If somebody
Mm.
doesn't know what they're doing, they're going to screw it up. And this guy, he's a friend of mine and I like him, but he did screw it up because he had three pictures in the envelope. And this building has a bunch of history. It used to be a theater. A bunch of people died in it. There was a fire. Then it was a church. Now it's a event like venue. People get married, have wedding receptions there. And
Mm.
he had pictures in that envelope from all those different time periods, 300 years. I'm
Uh,
like, what are you doing to me, man? That's not a target. That's a series of targets. you know, and he's like, oh, but he's like that, like a paranormal investigator. He's like, I want to know if there's ghosts in the basement. I didn't see any.
Yeah. No, that was awesome. I like that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I like doing them. Even when you're wrong, you learn something.
But are you really?
Um,
Because if you go back and look at it, you think, shit, actually, maybe I wasn't wrong. Because like you said, you
well,
might count, you might be tough on yourself. You might think, ah, fuck, I didn't get that because it wasn't a cup and the picture was a cup. But then if you look inside the cup, there might have been something that you had actually seen. So like, I remember, who was it? It was in David Moore, one of his I can't remember if it was in stage three. Yeah, he was doing the stage three explanation. And he was telling the people, so you look and you're busy drawing something and it's coming through to you. He says, but sometimes it's behind you. So just turn around. So you've got to turn around in the matrix to see the actual
mhm,
crystal because you might be there, you're just looking at the wrong thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So you've got to move to a point. So that's why I still think that water in the basement, for me, that counts, eh? Especially if you found
The,
that
the
afterwards.
the tasker felt the same way. But here's how
If
I
you
look at that,
feels.
okay?
Yeah.
So, I'm in sales and marketing for my whole adult life.
Mm.
And, if you do that, you're any good at it, you usually end up you go from salesman to sales manager, you're lucky you go from that to owner. I was fortunate to be able to do those things. But one of the things that I noticed as soon as I was a manager of other salespeople is this is how it always went. When they make a sale, they come back to the office and they relay to the manager and the owners and every other salesman around. People gather around, and you're going to tell them how amazing you are, how everything
Mm.
you said was perfect, how you were like a magician making this sale, just you spun it into gold right before their very eyes, and everything that you said was genius, and every question you asked them they responded to perfectly, right? And you made the sale. You did it. Look at you. Oh,
Mm.
it's breathtaking. And when they came back from the office and didn't make a sale, they kind of slunk into the office, right?
Yeah.
Don't make eye contact with anybody. Rush right to their desk, and then
Yeah.
somebody says, "How did it go?" And they invariably would tell you all the reasons why the guy was an idiot, right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's only their fault when they win. It's
Yeah.
somebody else's fault when they lose. I I try to apply that to anything that I'm trying to learn or be good at.
Okay.
Just getting it right is nowhere near, it's not even half of what learning something is.
Mhm.
You have to get it wrong. You not only have to get it wrong, you have to deeply understand
Mm.
what things happened wrong, what you did wrong about it. Uh, that is the difference between being passable at something and having a chance to become amazing at it. Is how well did you handle the failure?
Mm.
And so what you're like, you're being less hard on me than I am on that
Mm.
target, right? Fine. It's not that important. But the reason that I'm hard on myself about it is because um, I don't only want to find reasons why I was right.
Mm.
And that can be a slippery slope. Like I said with water, right? Water is a big one. It happens a lot because people live by water because they need it to live. They need it
Mm.
to grow things, so on and so forth. So probably 80% of all people live near water, and probably 80% of all targets are something near people. So you got like an 80% chance of being right anytime you have water. The only time you're going to be wrong is some of the time in a desert or the moon or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
always going to be able to find a reason that you were right about water. And what I recommend you do in that situation is look inside. Is that what it felt like I meant? That that it rained yesterday at this target? Or did what I feel like it meant when I was describing, when I felt like I had good contact with the target, that water is important to the target? And so that's really more of the ruler that I use to determine if there's something that maybe was kind of close. Yes, I could find a reason, but especially when you're learning, you should evaluate every single thing. And there's nothing wrong with giving yourself wins. That's an important part of how you learn too. But you also have to be willing to, that's a part of being good at something, is the ability to accept when you weren't, when you didn't do as good as you maybe could have.
I did a target where I was so off. I was like so off that I was like in the other ballpark. I think if I was supposed to be playing in America, I'm currently in South Africa, is how far off I was. Where
Right.
my ideogram had told me it's a structure. The only thing I did get was biological. But after I'd done this whole thing, I had this picture of a house in a like a mountainside where it was actually a bird on a flower. It's like so far off.
I think it's also important, I don't want to take what I said about beating yourself up when appropriate. And like, I'm not saying that that's like a hard and fast rule where I think there's a lot of benefit in remote viewing. I think it helps you understand yourself. I think in fact, I think it's a tremendous way to understand who you are and how your brain works, right? So you said it was a bird on a flower, right? But what you created or what you perceived probably more likely is what the impressions that you perceived led to you assuming was that it was a structure on a mountain, right? Well, and I can't answer this, only you can. What do you think about what your mind did there? Like, you probably know your mind better than I do. So what do you think happened? Like, I don't look at that as just a miss. I want to understand, what was it that my conscious mind was doing with that data, right? And this happens to me, I'm trying to think of an example. This happens to me a lot, where even my analytical tendencies, they tend to be metaphors. So especially if I'm like in training or working with a monitor, they're getting like irritated with me the whole time, because in stage 2, I'm saying it's like and that isn't stage 2 structure, right? I'm like, well, it's like there's this one that I did where I wrote an article about it on Substack. People can read it if they want, but there's a video we're putting together now for it, but it's turning into a whole thing. I don't know when it'll be out, but it was something that happened to me on a training target that was like profound. I ended up with a very emotional connection to the target. It freaked me out. I had never had this happen before, where like the history of the target and people had been, brutalized and stuff. That wasn't why they gave me the target. The target was just a canyon. But Native North Americans had lived in this canyon. They had been, basically systematically massacred, relocated. It's the whole story on our continent, really. And for whatever reason, that's just what my subconscious picked up on, was this. It was grief, is what it was. So I'm sitting there at a table across from a monitor crying, and I don't even know why. Right? I have to get through the rest of the session to figure out what it is that I'm feeling. I'd never gone through anything quite that emotional or dramatic in remote viewing, but it was a pretty big deal. But as I'm describing the target, I'm like, in stage 2, I'm like, people walk around here, and Angela, my monitor, is like, these aren't the words that she used, but basically what she's saying is, why do you keep doing stage 4 stuff in stage 2, right? Could you get back to Rocky red, brown, right? But that's just it's what my mind does. It's how I understand things. It's how we all understand things, is through metaphor. What is it like? But I do tend to get a lot of stage 4 stuff in stage 2. But I go back through and I look at, okay, it helps you understand things about yourself, how you think, what your values are, how you prioritize things, your hierarchy of what's important and needs and all that stuff. And so in that situation, it's like, okay, yeah, that was a miss. The data aspect of, gathering, impression data, making a document, producing a report. Yeah, you were off by a mile. But how did you get there? What happened in here because there's no question that you got data, right? You get the data whether you want it or not. Remote viewing is about a method with which to make use of it, and not have it just be very quiet, subconscious noise. So, yeah, from that standpoint, yeah, you were off by a mile. But dig in a little bit. How did you get that? And what I find happens for me is I end up better over the long term the more I can understand what my brain does, what my brain wants to do, what its tendencies are. It actually helps me get to a point where I'm better able to know the difference between signal and noise, if you will, or good target contact or not, is being able to, because you don't know what the target is until the end. That's when, and to me, that's the fresh time that, do it then and then do it later too. But, go back and like, what was I feeling? What was I thinking? What didn't I write down that I thought I should have for a split second? What did I disregard? They call it castle building. We all do that. Where, rocky, square, you become convinced it's got to be a block of stone. And then here's another block of stone. And, it's crenellated, and right. And you build a castle. But you didn't build the castle from nothing. You built the castle from initial impressions, and you let analysis take more of the process over than it should have, for where you were in the process. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that for that 15 minutes you weren't psychic. You were just doing remote viewing wrong. So how did you do it wrong? And I think that's a great time to do, is right at the end of the session, when it's fresh in your mind, what was really going on in here. Because it just happened. It's like, what was I feeling there? Where did this thing veer off? But even a bowl of plums and an elephant have a lot of similarities, right? You're looking at an elephant. It's like, okay, well, it's bulbous. A plum is bulbous. Elephants move around in packs. A bowl of plums, there's a bunch of plums. It's got a rounded exterior. You could go on.
Yeah.
But somewhere, the impressions that you got, you just started putting those impressions together, analysis wise, in a way that wasn't helpful to the process. But that doesn't mean that I don't believe there's this, I have target contact, I don't have target contact. No, I'm doing a good job following the process to decipher the data from my existing target contact this time. Other times I'm not. But especially if my information first frame, that's what I call my framework, by the way. The book, It From Us, is about that. If my framework, the metaphor I've created for understanding this, if that's correct, you're permanently connected to all data that could ever exist. It's just a question of, is my brain doing a good job of bringing that data, deciphering that data in a way that's constructive? That's all.
Okay. And tell me, it sounds like you use remote viewing quite often. Do you use it in your current job at all? Remote viewing?
No.
Not at all. Is it just a fun thing
Um,
that you do now?
for me, it's always been about, or it started out as, and just continued to be, a reliable window uh, from where I reside, which is in the material world. The best way that they have to explain it doesn't allow for this thing, right? Doesn't allow for remote viewing. Not just it doesn't explain it, it doesn't allow for it. If there's no particle, if there's no wave, there can be no function. That's our current understanding of physics. Right now, you could give me a target that is, it's just theoretically, it is on the other side of the solar system. And this is problematic because there probably isn't feedback, but I could accurately describe that target in less time than it would take the fastest thing we know of in the universe to get from there to here, which is a photon traveling at, several hundreds of thousands of feet per second. That right off the bat says we're dead wrong. This is in complete violation of everything we know. So for me, remote viewing has always been something empirical and reliable that can be that window between where I live and what the rest is. And so most of my work in remote viewing and my study of it has been from that perspective. The bet is if I can get to a point where I understand this thing as well as it is possible for me to understand it, I think that will provide me with maybe some of the best tools that might be available to see what those shortcomings are between our understanding and the truth. And I think that, my book is ended up being a good step in that direction because my framework makes one assumption, just one. And every other scientific theory that tries to explain reality makes at least 4 or 5. Some of them make a dozen or more. String theory is 12 plus assumptions. Many worlds is about that many. Simulation theory is 5. General relativity, I think, has 4. So I think that's what this has always been for me. Now, I've learned a lot about myself, about people, I've learned about a lot of other things, but I don't really look like I've tried to win the lottery a few times. And we did get, I think it was 9 out of 12 over I think it must have been 4 days on the pick 3. We got 9 numbers out of 12, but it wasn't enough to win money on any one of those days. Might be statistically significant, but it's not good enough, not good enough to make it worth it. And I don't get my pendulum out to decide which thing we should do, at my company, although I do keep it handy. I have a pendulum.
Oh, you also
in
got,
here.
okay, awesome. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but I use it for things that aren't that important, for fun. My kids love when I get it out.
Swing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
But no, I would tell you that I have a new appreciation for what I used to call instinct and what I would now probably be more willing to call intuition. A lot of times if we're trying to solve a problem like, whatever business thing, and a client is presenting the problem to me, or one of my staff is presenting it, where I would always ask a lot of questions. I want to understand it as good as I can. But now, more and more often, I find myself stopping them, like before their thought is complete, and I ask them, "What do you think the right answer is?" And what I'm really trying to get is, what's your instinct to tell you the right thing to do is here? And I don't keep a tally, but I think generally I have found that it's at least as reliable as trying to get all the answers and then decide tends to be. So yeah, I mean, I think it gives you tools. I just haven't figured out how you turn any of those tools into piles of cash yet.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna. I don't think we're gonna find that though. I wish they would actually start bringing these type of things into school curriculum. Start teaching the kids how to do these things.
Listen, I think that can happen. I look at, like, like my involvement with IRVA. I look at what the last 20, 25 years of remote viewing was. And it was by and large a bunch of people. Actually, it was a relatively small number of people putting up with jabs and barbs and giggles and ridicule. And guys like Paul Smith and Lynn Buchanan and Dave Morehouse, all these guys. This thing wasn't always as popular as it is now. This is the most popular that remote viewing has ever been. Even 10, 15 years ago, there weren't very many podcasts that wanted remote viewers on. And that's a double-edged sword, because now there's a whole bunch of people out there glued to YouTube that think if it was remote viewed, it must be true. Oh, they remote viewed the Galactic Council, and the Galactic Council, Jesus was there, and he said Earth's quarantine is extended another 100 years, and so Stephen Greer doesn't get to give you the proton drive. And it's like, oh, remote viewing is not. I mean, it's magical, but just because somebody remote viewed something doesn't mean it's true. I could put, I could get an envelope, and I could put, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in it, and I could give you the number, and you'd be like, oh, it's tentacly, it's huge. It doesn't mean that there's a, 100-foot long man-eating squid, swallowing submarines, right? It's not real. You were accurate. It doesn't make the thing true. But I look at that, that period of time, whatever it was, since the late 90s, and IRVA and all these guys. I mean, what they really did was they kept the light burning, and got this thing to the point now where people like you and people like me know that it's real. In fact, if you're like me, there would be no way for you to convince me. It would be a monumental effort to get enough data together to be able to convince me that this isn't real. It would need to be something even weirder than this for it not to be real. And I think about what that means. It means that we've taken this thing a lot farther than we think we have. Because I'm nobody. I'm just a guy who does marketing in Ohio, right? I don't have a PhD. And yet, when I came to understand that this thing was real, I ended up participating. Well, I think that we're still a long way to go before we're the, utopian, psychic culture of oneness. But I think we're on our way to that. And I think the next generation of people who work within these disciplines, if we're smart about it, we're going to build on what's been laid already, which is loads of empirical data, scientific data, studies, and maybe take it to the next level. The first generation or two, we're basically keeping it alive and just trying to gather enough data to show people that it's real. Well, now that that's happening, I think it's about inviting people to imagine where we could get with it, what it could mean for us. Big picture.
Yeah, well said. So right now, if somebody was to get hold of you, how do they do that? Because I know they can find your book on Amazon.
Yeah.
Is it an ebook as well, or do you need to order like the hard copy?
Kindle, hardcover, paperback, all three. I can't even tell you how weird it is to say this.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel like, I don't know, some kind of a jerk doing so. But I still feel like it's an accomplishment. So believe
Yeah,
me,
cool. Of course.
somebody like me, this is not supposed to happen. But it actually debuted at #1 in physics, number
Okay.
one in cosmology, number 15 in philosophy, number a bunch of them categories. It's like
Nice.
as soon as it came out, it was doing that, and it's continued to surprise me ever since. Stanley Krippner, I don't know if you know who Stanley Krippner
Mm.
is. Maybe like the original parapsychologist. He revolutionized how we study parapsychology. He him and guys like Pim Van Lommel, who really literally wrote the book on NDEs. These guys they're very old now, but they laid the groundwork. Without them, we would be nowhere close to where we are now. But Stanley Krippner helped me, gave me some guidance while I was writing some of the book. I didn't get into dreams at all when I was originally writing it. You know, what do I care about dreams? And he starts sending me stuff to read. He's like, read this, read this, read this, like a schoolmaster. And I'm like, well, I better do what he says. And ended up really adding a lot, rich dimension to my work. And I just talked to him the other day, and he read it, and he told some other people that I don't remember what his exact words were, but basically to have a guy like Stanley Krippner at that level, I think he's got at least one PhD, tell other people at that level that a guy like me has a good idea and that they should look at it. I mean, it's it's exciting, but it's also humbling, almost scary. It's like, this happened on accident. I just wanted to know how remote viewing worked. But yeah, anyway, so the answer to your question is you can go to itfromus.com. That's the website for this kind of stuff that I do. I've got a Substack. I've got a TikTok. In fact, I'm live on TikTok right now, but the people must be pretty irritated about it because they can't hear you. It's just like guy sits there for 5 minutes, nods his head, and then talks about who knows what, but
Yeah.
whatever, social media. But it's all the normal places. If you want to engage with it there, you can. I got a kind of a big sprawling video series on YouTube where I'm talking about different aspects of Information First and the book. Kind of, explaining them, going to neat locations. Like we went to this old courthouse to talk about how civilizations start and flourish and how that's an informational structure. And stuff like that. So I'm having a good time with it, trying to find time to run my business and make money in between, and raise kids. And sometimes I can tell my wife starts to look at me a certain way, and it's like, oh, okay, this week I better cool it on being an author and go back to being a dad for a couple of days.
Yeah, I know. Awesome, man. Right. I must say, it's been a pleasure having you on. It's really, really cool to talk.
Thank you.
Again, it's,
You don't have to work hard to get me to talk about remote viewing.
yeah, well, look,
I like doing it.
William and I, we made a decision probably about a month or two ago to for this channel, although it's a strange and mysterious world, we try and bring up so many different ideas that people have. It's a space where people can come and just tell us the ideas. We're not there to mock you. This is your space. This is what you want. Whether you're a Satanist or whether you're whatever. There's a place to talk. You can come and talk, and that's why we're here. But we made a decision some time back that we're going to start doing a lot more remote viewing things. So that's why we started. I mean, we've got Lynn on. Besides Dick, we had some time back, but we've got Lynn on. We've done a remote viewing session now. Some time back, we did a remote viewing session for the prophecies for this year. We've got, I don't know if you heard, but the last podcast, we gave out some numbers for our subscribers to listen to do their own remote viewing session, and then to send us some pictures and, via email so that we can have them on the next podcast where we do a remote viewing session of numbers that were given to us by one of our subscribers. So we're trying to get a little bit more into the remote viewing section with Strange and Mysterious World, although we're still going to have guests coming from the outside to do other things. We want to try and put in a few more, at least once a month, get some remote viewing stuff going on. So I love it. And if
Well, I'm
you'd like
glad you're
to
doing
come
that.
back, if you'd like to come back sometime, we can do a proper session where we can actually, the three of us can actually get a target from somebody that we can sit and do a remote view with the three of us doing it together.
I'm definitely down for that. I think that, the problem with that really is tasking. That's why you don't see a lot of it, is because if the tasking isn't right, I think initially remote viewers were like, well, I better not do it live because what if I miss?
Yeah.
And jeopardize the whole field, jeopardize everyone's credibility. And I understand that. But again, I think we're past that anyway. And I don't think that's something I don't think we need to be afraid of what people think. But but the tasking has to be right. And I think that's why you don't see all that much of it. But I'd rather spend 10 minutes talking about the tasking before the show, make sure that, the protocols are followed, it's established, the intention is right. Because, if you try to give me a thing that used to be a theater and it burned down and everybody died and it's a church and a water filtration system for the hospital next door, we're going to be all over the place. But no, I think look at what we have at our disposal. We can do something like this and, whatever, hundreds, thousands of people can see it. And maybe a seed gets planted that goes on to I read a book by Ingo Swann 5 years ago because I was depressed and bored. And now Stanley Krippner tells a bunch of room full of PhDs that they should read my book. Right?
Yeah.
Do
cool.
it. Do some remote viewing sessions. Show some people.
Yeah. 100%. We need to get more people awakened in this world.
Agreed.
Yeah. And that's Ryan Lecker, man. Again, much appreciated for your time. And enjoy your weekend further. And we will definitely chat to you again sometime. It's very cool having you on again. Much appreciated.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And
all right, guys and girls, that was our session for tonight. It's always fantastic to talk about remote viewing and people's passion with remote viewing. I hope you guys are enjoying these sessions. And we will definitely get to a session where we'll teach you guys how to do stage 1, 2, and 3. Still waiting for your feedback on that. Otherwise, everybody, thanks again for listening. Please like and subscribe, and we will chat to you next week. Thanks, everybody.